nata rasa jivam sadvaitam sadvadutam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishana Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radha Vrindaveshwari Vrishbhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vansha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanam Pavenbhyo Vaishnave Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Paskata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Text 13. Dehi noshmin yata dehi kaumaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra na muyati. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation: as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport: since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body, and since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there is no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice in their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there is no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the changes of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme clavable or changeable against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatanana, and are called sara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the super soul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon, and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities, and the sun or the moon is the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the supreme soul is the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed become meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusionary energy Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other instructed. Such instruction would be useless because, in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity Arjuna, who is a forgotten soul deluded by Maya. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Guravani Pracharine Nirviseso Sunyavadi Paskata Deshatarine. Well, yeah, there's a lot here. So yeah, the reason I chose this verse is for a few different reasons. And listening to the lectures from Prabhupada, he said that this was the first teaching that Krishna gave to Arjuna, which is that I'm not the body. And listening to like Dear Govinda's lecture from last week, we're really talking about how the root cause of suffering is misidentification of the self with the body. So it's really the answer to the question of who am I? And yeah, we use these analogies all the time, and they're such good reminders. It's like, take a computer, for example. You have the hardware and the software. The hardware is the physical body, muscles and bones, and then the software is the emotions and the feelings. And it's like, who am I? Well, I'm neither the hardware or the software. I'm the soul. I'm the self. And yeah, the other analogy is we were the driver, or the driver of the car. We aren't the car, we're the owner of the car. And we get wrapped into so much suffering by basing our conception of who we are with this physical body. And in the purport, it talks a lot about death. And that's something that's seems to be discussed a lot in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam classes. And it's like just like a personal story. Like my father died when I was 14, and that was a big whoa, we're gonna die. Like, what happens? And another reason why I really chose this verse, when I was in North Carolina at an Ishkan temple, I got a Bhagavad Gita. It was for children, and it had like coloring in kind of things. It had 47 of the key verses of the Bhagavad Gita for kids. And the very first verse was this verse. And I was just like looking to see how we deal with death in the West. And it's very taboo to talk about. And it's kind of pushed under the rug, like, oh yeah, they had a really good life, or they died in their sleep. That's the only thing that's really talked about it around death. And there's no teaching, there's no education, there's nothing at all that I've seen in any level of education from K to university, like about death. Maybe a few classes like here and there, philosophy or whatever, but generally speaking, it's not talked about at all. And yeah, it's something that we all deal with. And I'm smiling and laughing, but it is serious. It is serious, and it's not. It's serious in the fact that if we're identifying as ourselves with this body, then it's maybe really scary. But if we're taking these teachings from Srila Prabhupada and from the Bhagavad Gita, from Krishna, then we're doing our best to remember and cultivate the state of who we actually are, which is the soul, which is the self. And yeah, I loved what Melanie was saying on Saturday, just about death. And the only thing we can say about every single baby is that this baby is going to die. We don't know whether they'll become this profession or that profession, have money, anything. But the only truth that we know is death for everyone. And yeah, the backdrop for the Bhagavatam is King Parikshit gets cursed by a Brahmin boy. And he's given this emperor of the world. Emperor has everything, and a good emperor, really a king of Dharma. And he is cursed over a boy's drama. And within a few minutes, he makes the decision to renounce everything and to ask the important question: what is the duty of one who is about to die? And here we are about to die. We don't know. We don't know whether we have 7 days or 7 minutes or 7 years. So yeah, that's why we're here, is to really open ourselves up to these teachings of spirituality. And Prabhupada was saying that, like, this is the first lesson, and this is the beginning to really entering into spiritual life, is remembering we're going to die, and no longer doing our best to stop being so wrapped up in identification with this physical body. So to begin to cultivate our spirituality. And yeah, so I mean, he in listening to some of the lectures on this verse, he'll talk about the senses and how limited our senses are. Like, I can only see, he gave the example, you can only see a mile away, or the sun looks like it's like as big as my hand, when really it's many thousands of times bigger than the earth. So it's like our senses are so limited. So how, like he was saying, we can't even understand the material world through our senses. Like we don't know, like, where our senses are so limited that we cannot understand the material world. So how are we even going to understand the spiritual world? And yeah, and then around the senses, he then spoke a lot about controlling the senses, and starting with the tongue. So this is kind of the formula that he's beginning to give us through the acharyas, controlling the tongue. So what is the tongue used for? It's used for eating and vibrating. So really looking at, what are we speaking about? What are we talking about? Are the things that we're talking about meaningful? Like, are we talking about the celebrities in the news and who's married and who's pregnant? Are we talking about the sport team? Like, what are we, like, really just bring this awareness and being honest. But COVID, are we talking about COVID? Yes. Yeah, just being honest with like bringing this awareness is sattva. David always says, like, sattva is bringing to awareness. So it's like, okay, what am I talking about? Like, looking at my day, looking at my week, what are my interactions like? Like, what am I spending time speaking about and indulging in with my tongue, which is the most important sense that we need to work on controlling and managing. And then from that point, asking ourselves, maybe like, is this meaningful? Is this fulfilling? Like, is this bringing meaning and fulfillment to my life, talking about someone else's problems? Like, we have this really, my experience is that generally speaking, we have this tendency to be happy when other people are suffering. And that's just, if you go to any like shopping, whatever, and you see all the news, like tabloids or whatever, it's just always like, this person is bankrupt, this person is getting divorced. And it's like, this is what we talk. I mean, it's Kali Yuga. So yeah, there's a lot of delusion and a lot of suffering. And yeah, we had this tendency, or this conditioning, I think is a better word, to really like indulge when other people are suffering, like to be happy, like, or to get some kind of false happiness, like, oh, they're suffering, like, so now my life's a little better. I don't know. Yeah, it sounds really ridiculous. And anyway, so controlling the tongue, becoming aware of and a huge part of that is becoming aware of our association. And yeah, like, you can read, like, what am I reading? Am I reading really deep spiritual wisdom books from Srila Prabhupada, or am I reading the newspaper about someone's problems? And then really, like, because this is who we're, like, association is who are we letting into our hearts. So it's not necessarily like, who do I see in the corner of the room, but like, who am I hearing from? And reading is a big process of hearing. So what am I talking about with my friends? Who are my intimate connections? What are we discussing? And yeah, and then so then the other process of the tongue is is tasting. And Prabhupada stresses again and again the importance of prasadam, which is just offering food to Lord Krishna and saying that I'm making this food for Krishna to enjoy, and we're spiritualizing it. And this is bringing me to this this idea of like, what is the difference between humans and animals? And humans, we are animals, right? We are animals. And the four kind of, I don't know what you would call it, four components, sleeping, eating, mating, and defending, that we all have. But the difference between the human life is we get to ask these difficult questions, and we get to walk along this path of self-realization, of turning the self towards the self, beginning to look within. We're so distracted, so looking outside, so focused on sleeping, eating, mating, and defending. And again, it is also stressed that it's not renouncing those things. It's rather transforming those things, or regulating those things, the regulative principles of freedom. And this is bringing me a few weeks ago, I forgot who said it, the scientific study that they asked parents like what they want to protect their children from, and it was like drugs, sex, and gambling. and it's so beautiful that like those are three of the four regulative principles of freedom that Srila Prabhupada has given us. And in my own life, I've noticed it really is a certain sense of freedom to have this structure. So stepping outside of sleeping, eating, mating, and defending. And I know later in the Gita, Krishna says it's, the devotee or the yogi is not one who sleeps too little or too much, not one who eats too little or too much. So really regulating our tongue, regulating our sleeping. And then the other thing that separates humans from animals is the ability to ask questions and the ability to reflect, this awareness that we are conscious, and like this consciousness, we are conscious, and we are consciousness itself. So being able to ask questions and being able to really, like a question like, what is the purpose of one who is about to die? And really living life for a higher and more meaningful, more fulfilling purpose. Again, the first instruction from Srila Prabhupada for spiritual understanding from Krishna to Arjuna is, I am not this body. And then this process of controlling the tongue, and he gives us prasadam for food. And then the other really important stressor is chanting, or speaking, but specifically chanting, and chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Another like a story that I heard recently that I really liked. It was by Radhanath Swami, and he was giving a story of one of the first times his parents came to visit him in India. They went on like a hike in a forest, and this was like the 80s, and the parents had or his mom had her purse, and in her purse she had everything, like passports, visas. There was like everything valuable, and I think we know what's going to happen. A monkey comes up and steals the purse, and it was. He said that his parents were very concerned because they for those of there's no internet, there was no computers really, there wasn't just oh, let me just go print out my visa again, or let me just get a new passport. It would have been months of standing in line, months and hours of standing in line to get a new visa, to get a new passport, etc. And eventually what happens is Radhanath Swami goes and gets a banana, and he trades the banana for the purse. So and I really like the analogy where it's we have this monkey mind, and we're very distracted, and we're very jumping from place to place, and this idea of giving the mind something sweeter. And what is that? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's this idea of spiritualizing everything that we do. And I've heard this before, that really at first, like this can be really bitter medicine. Like when we're starting to practice this path laid out by Srila Prabhupada, like it can be very challenging because a lot of anarthas are going to come up, a lot of things that we have to let go of and purify, and it can be very challenging. But slowly, as the teachers assure us and as senior devotees assure us, that by practicing this, it gets sweeter and sweeter. And the monkey mind slowly starts to understand, like, oh wow, like this is more fulfilling. This is better than anything I was doing earlier in life that wasn't that was so wrapped up in Maya and in material nature. So yeah, really this process of engaging in this path and trusting it, and then the last thing that I'll say is really like this is a really like world embracing path, and it's really, yeah, it's about engaging the senses. That was another thing, like we can't understand Krishna. Prabhupada was saying that our position is we cannot understand Krishna by our mental speculation or limited senses. So it's going back to, yeah, our senses are so limited. Like we can't understand it by just speculating. We have to engage everything. And yeah, I'm so grateful that we have like a way and a path for us to engage in devotional service and bhakti and cultivating this love for God. And I feel, let me see if there's, yeah, I feel pretty complete with my sharing. I would read the verse one more time and then open it up for discussion. Dehi no shmin yata dehi kamaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. I'll read the translation again. Thank you. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So I now open it up for anyone who wants to share or discuss any reflections, insights, questions. Yes.
Thank you, Nico. I really like the way that the well-roundedness of your presentation. You know, you presented one point at a time, connected with the body, connected with our human situation, and in a way that was easy to understand. And when you were speaking about the difference between human and animals, and that they don't ask questions and they don't have I was also thinking, like, what came to my mind is, oh yes, that's true. And also, you know, like they don't do austerity. Like you were saying, it's a bitter process. You say it's bitter because we need to control the senses. And, you know, if you say like a monkey, like, okay, control your sex urge, you know, the monkey doesn't care, but human beings do care. So I appreciate you presented those, you know, like, yeah, we ask questions, and also we have a capacity to do austerity, and even so it's bitter, like the result is so satisfying. And animals don't have that capacity. Because someone told me once, well, you don't know if the animals don't speak about philosophy or ask questions. That's true. I don't know. But what I do know is that by observing animals, I don't see them doing much austerity.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I get that. I appreciate the lecture and especially about animals. Like they could be asking questions, we don't know, but we know they're not doing any tapas. They're not doing any. They're not delaying instant gratification for long-term fulfillment. And like we have that choice to delay instant gratification for long-term fulfillment.
I love the way you said that, like delaying gratification, instant gratification, because that's where we really get so damaged. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, our conditioning here is instant gratification, like, oh, this, and really like delaying it seems to lead to more fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems even more and more like I was listening to a class of Srila Prabhupada, you don't need to turn, but I was listening to a class of Prabhupada, you can translate people, and it was about childhood. And even like if we go back 50 or 60 years ago, like it was still clear in people's mind that childhood was training time. It's training time. You have little people who don't know how to be human and they don't know much. And it's training time for adulthood. But now more and more, and Srila Prabhupada points that out, like right now, childhood is for the sake of childhood. Be happy and merry and gratified. And that becomes the goal of childhood, is that the child is happy and gratified. And there is no more sense of that preparation. And Srila Prabhupada was making the point that in the same way, less and less there is a sense of this life is to prepare for the next.
Yeah. For those who may not have heard, Melanie was just explaining that childhood used to in the past be kind of like a training ground. Like we're going to train this person to be an adult. But now looking at childhood, it's just instant gratification. Like how can I get the kid to stop crying? Or like what can I give them? Like a phone or food or anything, and
candy,
soda, anything, just to gratify their senses instantly. And this is kind of reminding me of the traditional system in India, where the first 25 years you're the celibate student. You know, you're preparing for your family life and for the future. So yeah, thank you.
No gratification.
Yeah, no gratification there. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, I'll just mention that I was able to hear Malini very well, even though she's behind the computer. Somehow I heard her very well. Probably others did too. Bhakta Nico, I appreciated your class very much. I got realization from it, and I was moved, and deepened my grasp of this foundational verse of Bhagavad Gita. Some of the things you shared remind me of, I heard a class from Prabhupada. I heard this a few years ago, and so he was talking about material consciousness, and he was saying material consciousness means, just like you were talking about, the envy principle. He said material consciousness, it means that when someone is suffering, doing poorly, then we are happy. If someone is doing well, then we are suffering. And then Prabhupada said, of course we don't say that. Of course, oh, I feel so bad for you, and oh, I'm so happy at your success. So just like in a very simple childlike way, Prabhupada just pierces through the layers. Like, yeah, not only are we miserable at someone's success and happy at when they're suffering, but we're deceptive and say the opposite to the extent we're in material consciousness. So it's so psychologically astute. And then he said, and the spiritual consciousness, he's talking about Prahlad Maharaj has a verse, and Prahlad Maharaj talks about paradukkha dukhi, which means that, a true devotional heart is pained at the pain of others, and generally joyful at their success. Of course, we're talking here not just some superfluous success, but really the success of the soul and their self-realization. And so he was just making that contrast, and that can be kind of like a gauge or a test for ourselves, to see to what extent am I really devoting myself to the true happiness of others, which of course comes with, as you said, the self turning towards itself and self-discovery, the self turning towards God, Krishna, spirit of devotion. To what extent am I really happy for their success and really pained when, in their miserable suffering condition, and really compassionately wanting to help? It can be a test of our own progress or lack of it. And then, and then relatedly, we're talking about the different magazines at the checkout rack like that. In the,
I like that too.
yes, in the Sri Upadeshamrita, that's the Nectar of Instruction. It's one of the books of the Goswamis that Prabhupada gave us. The second text, Srila Rupa Goswami, he describes 6 items or 6 ways of being that really interfere with progress in self-realization and bhakti yoga. Atyahara prayashascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangas chalolimcha sadbir bhakti prasidati. So that one of those items is prajalpa, which basically means gossip, useless. As you said, who's going out with who, and who's suffering with this one, and who's pregnant with this one's child, and this one that all of that. And so as your class nicely illustrated, we can look at what are we talking about? What sort of vibrations are we hearing? What sort of vibrations are we uttering? And to what extent is it genuinely geared towards sattva, self-realization, God consciousness, meaningful values, higher values of life? To what extent is it simply going to entangle us further in the conditioned illusion that I am the software or the hardware, like that? Thank you for your class. I'm appreciating it very much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. I appreciate your sharing. Thank you for sharing that story about Srila Prabhupada. And really what I was hearing was like this spiritual compassion and being able to really enter into the other person's world and see that they're suffering, like you were saying, like spiritual maturity. It's really seeing that their suffering is my suffering, and that their pain is and that their happiness is also my happiness. So how much can we like really enter the other person's world and meet them where they're at, and be happy for their happiness, and really sit in their own in their suffering as well. Thank you for sharing.
Hare Krishna.
Would anyone else like to share any insights or comments? Okay. Well, thank you so much for showing up, and thank you for entering into this beautiful space together where we listen to some beautiful teachings from Srila Prabhupada, and coming together in community. Can't see anything better than this. So thank you so much for Melanie for organizing this, and I look forward to next week. I don't know who's teaching. Do you know who's teaching?
There was someone, and now the slot is open. Anybody want to jump in?
The slot is open next week. If anyone wants to jump in. And now we have a link that people directly can click on and put themselves on this question.
Thank you. I'll just mention. Thanks for choosing this verse. This is it's one of the verses in all of the Vedas, including Bhagavad Gita, that Prabhupada spoke on most. I'm glad you're listening to his lectures there. And I'll just say, if someone wants to learn one Gita verse, this is a good choice. This is a good choice. It's oft quoted by Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Haribol.
All right. Hare Krishna. Jai. What do I say?
Srimad Bhagavad Gita.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Jai. Jai. Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Haribol. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for class, Nico.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.